we start off today with a UFO cult, known as the Superior Universal Alignment. Also known as, wait for it, Lineamiento Universal Superior, it was founded by Valentina de Andrade in 1981. She claimed to have received messages from extraterrestrials warning her of destruction. If, however, she shared their warnings with others, she and her followers would be saved. Similar to the Raelians, SUA believes that Jesus was actually an extraterrestrial messenger. They also believe that males born after 1981 are evil and that their lives should end as payment to the superior beings. In 1989, the Amazonian town of Altamira received a sudden increase in reports of missing boys. Not having clear clues about the disappearances, the authorities couldn't do anything about it. By 1993, the reports rose to 19 missing young folks with no trace or clue as to find them. By that time, the bodies of 5 of the missing were found dead with signs of torment and castration, and it was determined that these killings were connected to the medical guild because the castration seemed to be made by a medical expert. But other than that, nobody knew anything and there was no evidence. So the authorities opened an investigation and began to connect the dots between the killings and those who were missing. The bodies of the boys were identified as homeless ones who had worked in the streets, but most of the missing ones had been reported by their families. This fact unsettled and confused the detectives in charge of the investigation, and they were like, okay, both cases can't be related, because who's so depraved? Well, all their efforts weren't really doing much until one day. One boy came to them and was like, hey, I escaped from my captors, let me tell you everything. The brutality described seemed as if it was ripped from the pages of a horror novel. Some of the atrocities that he suffered that I can say included the castration, obviously, and mutilation, everything else I can't say. He also explained that other victims were impaled to death and their organs were extracted and sold to the black market. Some unofficial versions state that the captors even ate the organs, but there's no official confirmation on that front. Brazilian society was shocked when the victim identified those in charge, since a lot of the folks identified were respected members of society. We're talking 2 doctors, a wealthy businessman, a police officer, and Valentina de Andrade. The leader of the group managed to escape from justice when she presented a very convincing alibi, stating that she wasn't in town when the killings took place. She was exonerated, and now she's happily guiding her increasing flock of followers who simply ignore these crimes. Great. Good leader. Moving on to the Nuwaubian Nation, which was a black supremacist cult, but instead of enacting a race war, its leader, Dwight York, mostly used it to amass a stable of young body selling service type SLAVES. So York began founding several black Muslim groups back in New York in 1967 and changed his teachings and names of his groups many times, incorporating concepts from Judaism, Christianity, UFO religions, New Age, and many esoteric beliefs. Essentially whatever pieces of other religions that fit his quote-unquote vision, he used, building quite the mosaic. In the late 1980s, he abandoned the black Muslim theology of his movement in favor of Kemetism and UFO religion. In 1991, he took his community to settle in upstate New York and then near to Eatontown, the county seat of Putnam County in Georgia. His followers built an ancient Egypt-themed compound called Tamaray and changed their name to the United Nuwaubian Nation of Moors. York published around 450 booklets under numerous pseudonyms, by the way. During the late 1990s, he styled himself a Messiah founder prophet type of his own movement, sometimes claiming divine status or extraterrestrial origin when appearing on his Savior's Day celebrations at Tamaray. Are you still following me? Swell, because we're far from done. By the year 2000, the United Nuwaubian Nation of Moors had around 500 followers. Granted, they did draw thousands of visitors for Savior's Day ceremonies. Now, the followers kind of declined steeply after York was convicted of numerous counts of bad touching young people, racketeering, and financial reporting violations, and sentenced to 135 years in federal prison in April of 2004. The compound was sold under government forfeiture and demolished, and the Southern Poverty Law Center officially designated this group as a hate group. The group has taken numerous names, though, throughout its history, including, let's see if I can get this right, Ansaru Allah Community, Holy Tabernacle Ministries, Yamasee Native American Moors of the Creek Nation, which was also used in Georgia when York claimed indigenous ancestry via Egyptian migration and intermarriage with the ancient Olmec, and we've already talked about Nuwaubian Nation of Moors. By the way, York is still in prison for, bad things, but his followers have continued popping up over the years, mostly after they do crimes. Great. As of 2010, some factions of the subculture in the United States appeared to continue to support York, portraying his conviction as a conspiracy by the white power structure. Malik Zulu Shabazz, chairman of the new Black Panther Party and York's lawyer, described him as a great leader of our people and a victim of an open conspiracy by our enemy. So, make of that what you will. Next up we have Providence, which is officially known as Christian Gospel Mission, CGM, Jesus Morning Star, or JMS. Geez, a lot of these things have a lot of names. It's a Christian new religious movement founded by Jung Myung-suk in 1980 and headquartered in Wolmyongdong, South Korea. I swear I looked up how to pronounce it, folks. It's been widely referenced by international media as a cult, and you're about to find out why. So in the 1970s, this leader was a member of the Unification Church, or UC, which he based his teaching on. When he founded his own group in the 80s, it criticized Christian teachings and beliefs and maintained that their leader was the second coming of Jesus Christ, and was later expelled from the Methodists. The name was changed to the International Christian Association in the mid-1980s, and a rift occurred in the group in 1986 when the vice president of Providence attempted to act on the scandal surrounding the group. But he was shut out of the organizational system, and Jung consolidated all the power around himself. In October of 1999 was when the organization officially became Christian Gospel Mission. So what were the lessons of this cult? Alrighty, everybody, buckle in. One lesson implies that those who do not meet the leader will not go to heaven. Another is that anybody who's going to betray the leader, you're committing a grave crime. During the instruction of the advanced level of the 30 lessons, it is taught that your leader is the Messiah, proven through the numerological interpretation of prophecy dates and times in the book of Daniel. Providence preaches the advent of the complete Testament era and allegorizes the relationship between God and man to that between the groom and bride, or two lovers. It also teaches that the original sin was caused by Eve's intercourse with the fallen angel, who turned into Satan. And Providence teaches that this can be redeemed by having intercourse with your leader. Oh yeah, forgot that little thing. The leader of all this was found to have forced female followers to have coitus with them as a religious behavior meant to save their souls in the Korean court of law. Former members have stated or testified that young and attractive women were presented to their leader as gifts, with whom he coercively engaged in icky acts, which was explained to them as a purification rite. So in April of 2009, our crazy leader was convicted of harming someone in the R-word way by the Supreme Court of Korea and sentenced to only 10 years of imprisonment. He was released in February of 2018, and following his release from prison, the Korea Post reported that the Providence faith movement had reached more than 70 countries. Before I get sick, we're moving on to the Nation of Yahweh. In 1978, Hulan Mitchell Jr. left the Nation of Islam because it just wasn't extreme enough for him. He rechristened himself Yahweh ben Yahweh and founded the Nation of Yahweh. Try saying that 5 times fast. The group is classified as another black supremacist cult by the Southern Poverty Law Center and as an official cult by the Miami Herald. Swell. The SPLC has criticized the beliefs of the Nation of Yahweh as racist, stating that the group believes that black people are the true race and that whites hold wicked powers. They've apparently calmed down a bit in recent years, but the belief still seems to hold. The SPLC also claims that the group believes that Yahweh ben Yahweh had a mission to vanquish whites, and that it held views similar to those of the Christian identity movement, which believes that Aryans are the true bad guys and non-whites are devils. It got to the point where Yahweh proved so popular that he got his own day in Miami, but then he started commanding his followers to kill for him, went to prison for conspiracy to commit killings, and died shortly after his release. He still has a handful of followers in Miami though, although their activity seems to be mostly limited to like, Yahweh's the best, and posting memes about bad things and homophobic scourges on their Facebook page. The group is reportedly spread throughout the US and no longer concentrated in one location. More recently, the group appeared in the news back in 2012 after Michael the Black Man, real name Maurice Woodside, a member of the group who is now a conservative activist, was invited to speak at a rally for Rick Santorum's presidential campaign, during which he said that Democrats were similar to Yazis. Woodside has since become a vocal supporter of Donald Trump, but continues to defend Yahweh ben Yahweh and the nation's beliefs. Alrighty, everybody, we're going to end today with the 12 tribes, formerly known as the Vine Christian Community Church, the Northeast Kingdom Community Church, the Messianic Communities, and the Community Apostolic Order. They're a new religious movement founded by Gene Spriggs that sprang out of the Jesus movement in 1972 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The group calls itself an attempt to recreate the first century church as it is described in the book of Acts. The group's origins in Chattanooga led to planted churches in surrounded areas, and in the late 70s, the group began a community in Island Pond, Vermont. As the relationship with the Chattanooga community deteriorated, the group eventually left Tennessee, and Vermont became the main area. So the 12 tribes' beliefs resemble those of Christian fundamentalism, the Hebrew Roots movement, Messianic Judaism, and the Sacred Name movement. However, the group believes that all other denominations are fallen, and it therefore refuses to align itself with any denomination or movement. The group has very strict courtship rules, and their views on raising young humans have been a source of controversy. The group supports itself through the operation of several businesses, most of which revolve around agriculture, as well as cafes, restaurants, all using unpaid and often young labor. Oh yeah, young people have been noted to play a central role in the group's beliefs, especially the sons. The 12 tribes believe that it is the parents' responsibility to properly enforce a consequence for sin, so as to allow young people to maintain the state of a clean conscience. So over time, future generations will be better equipped to deal with or overcome the faults of their predecessors. This will apparently enable future generations of the group to hopefully be the 144,000 of Revelation 7. If it wasn't already obvious, folks here are homeschooled, and within the group, young people are apprenticed to elders by the age of to be trained in crafts and specialized labor. The group acknowledges using corporal punishment with a reed-like rod, like a balloon stick, across the rear end, and many former members say punishments can include severe repetitions to the point of fluid release or collapse, and are often repeated daily. The group has obviously ignited controversy and garnered unfavorable attention regarding their practices and accusations of harm. They've been criticized for their beliefs and practices, including for their supremacist views towards Black and Jewish people outside of their membership. The group's teachings have been characterized as racist, misogynistic, and homophobic. And ex-members report excessive corporal punishment, failure to stop harm, and exploitation of followers for labor. Some governments and advocacy groups have labeled the group a cult, and well, I can see why. So Rajneesh was the self-proclaimed Moses to his faithful flock, the anthill. If you think I forgot a word there, it was intentional, so I don't get in trouble. This cult's journey began with a twisted prophecy woven from a belief in the apocalypse. As a youngster, Thériault dropped out of school and started teaching himself the Old Testament. He was convinced that a war between good and evil was about to come. And, well, what's it gonna do? Bring about the end of the world. How'd you know? Thus, he converted to the Seventh-day Adventist Church and lived by their rules. No tobacco, no unhealthy foods, no booze, no substances, nada, no vices. Thériault was a charismatic man. He was good at persuading others to do his bidding. Now, while organizing seminars for the Adventists, he convinced an entire group of people to quit their jobs and form his religious following. Now, he formed this commune in 1977, and it initially promised sin-free utopia and unity. Sounds perfect. He was no longer hush to the world. He was Moses. So, how do we sustain this idyllic life? The sale of baked goods. But behind the bustling bakeries, Thériault's grip tightened with increasingly cruel and bizarre rules. Members were forbidden from speaking without his presence and cut off from their families entirely. Also, Buddy developed a drinking problem, which went against all of his previous beliefs. He also started spying on his followers, and if you didn't seem devoted enough, he's gonna punish you. If you want to leave, well, he's going to be enraged. And the horror didn't stop with the psychological harm. He would often discipline his followers by becoming a self-proclaimed surgeon, using crude tools like kitchen utensils, pliers, and blowtorches to mutilate his followers. And blowtorches to harm his followers. Limbs, teeth, fingers, and toes were all sacrificed. He'd ordered the faithful to break their own legs, fire at each other, and endure inhuman practices like eating what they put out. Insects and rats. Even his own offspring weren't spared. One passed away during a botched circumcision, and the other was left to perish in a blizzard. As the well-being of his seminars decreased, well, Thériault became more and more convinced of his godly delusions. It became apparent to him that the world would end in 1979, and he drove his commune into the Canadian wilderness, convinced that, for some reason, God would skip a chance to destroy Quebec. So 1979 came and went, but the world didn't really end. Now, Moses explained this away by saying our world and God's world run on different time zones. However, this crazy explanation actually didn't stop his followers from romanticizing him and proclaiming him as their absolute leader. Now, in the Canadian wilderness and later the woods of Ontario, his female concubines bore him 26 new followers. Now, Moses, as the ultimate effed up cult leader, would harm his descendants, and welfare authorities would come and take them away. It took a near-death escape by Gabrielle Lavallée to expose the horrors of the anthill. Gabrielle endured unimaginable acts. We're talking hypodermic syringes in her spine, torches to her no region, and amputations. Now, in 1989, the cult's torment finally ended, with Thériault imprisoned for life. And in 2011, another inmate took his life. So a figure emerged in the 1970s that would captivate the hearts and minds of thousands. Chandra Mohan Yen, known to his followers as Osho, embarked on a journey that would create the Rajneesh movement. Now, this movement was controversial at the time, due to the founders' hostility, first to Hindu morality in India, and later to Christian morality in the US. In the Soviet Union, the movement was banned as being contrary to positive aspects of Indian culture and to the aims of the protest movement in Western countries. Now, the positive aspects were allegedly being subverted by the leader, whom the Soviet government considered a reactionary ideologue of the monopolistic bourgeoisie of India and a promoter of consumerism in a traditional Hindu guise. Osho's quest began in India, where his teachings carried a unique brand of controversy. He criticized Gandhi and really opposed state-sanctioned marriage. For him, love was meant to be free, unburdened by the chains of traditional wedlock. As he gained followers, he only got more power. His followers wore specific robes and adopted new names. So our leader, Osho, originally became Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, the leader of this crazy movement. And his original teachings eventually twisted into greed and killing. Now, the movement thrived, accumulating wealth through a myriad of business enterprises. Osho's obsession with the Rolls Royce began to reflect a new message, that wealth and spirituality could coexist. But then, as things do, they took a turn for the worse. At the peak of these tensions, a circle of leading members of the Oregon Commune was arrested for crimes including an attempted assassination plot to kill U.S. Attorney Charles H. Turner, and the United States' first ever recorded bioharm attack calculated to influence the outcome of a local election in their favor. Granted, these efforts ultimately failed. In this bio-attack, Salmonella bacteria was deployed to infect salad products in local restaurants and shops, which poisoned several hundred people. Osho was deported from the US in 1985 as part of his Alford plea deal following the convictions of his staff and right-hand man who were found guilty of the attack. After his deportation, 21 countries denied him entry, and the movement's headquarters eventually returned to India, and the Oregon Commune was destroyed in September of 1985. Now, Osho's legacy lives on, The 12 tribes began under the leadership of Albert Eugene Spriggs. Now, this cult, founded in 1972, has been responsible for manipulative tactics that trapped thousands beneath the facade of communal living. The origins of the 12 tribes movement can reportedly be tracked back to the Light Brigade ministry that operated out of the Lighthouse, which was a small coffee shop in the home of Gene Spriggs and wife Marcia. Now, the Light Brigade began living, communally, and opened a restaurant, which was called the Yellow Deli, while its members were attending several churches, before they all decided to join the First Presbyterian Church. Now, members of this brigade, well affiliated with the First Presbyterian, kinda caused friction within its establishment. What did they do? Well, they brought in anybody who was willing to come with them, including members of, different social classes, different racial groups, a practice which, wasn't really engaged in at the time. On January 12th of 1975, the group arrived at First Presbyterian only to find that the service had been canceled for the Super Bowl, and this led the group to form the Vine Christian Community Church. During this time, the group planted churches, each with its own Yellow Deli, in Dalton and Trenton, Georgia, in Alabama, and in Dayton, Tennessee. Their withdrawal from the religious mainstream turned what had once been a friction-filled relationship into an outcry against them. They began holding their own services, which they called Critical Mass, in Warner Park in Chattanooga, appointing elders and baptizing people outside of any denominational authority. The 12 tribes' beliefs resemble those of Christian fundamentalism, the Hebrew Roots movement, Judaism, and the Sacred Name movement. However, the group believes that all other denominations are fallen, and it therefore refuses to align itself with any denomination or movement. The group has strict courtship rules, and overall just really strict everything rules. So, folks become subject to rules dictating the number of toilet paper sheets you can use, also the shape of your eyeglasses. New members are forced to relinquish their identities, any property, and any ties to the outside world. This group takes manipulation to the extremes, particularly when it comes to younger members. Their relentless use of excessive corporal punishment is nothing short of barbaric. Folks that aren't even old enough to talk yet are subjected to painful spankings with thin wooden rods, all justified by twisted interpretations of biblical principles. Now, if you're gonna leave, you're gonna face some coercion and horrific threats. Those who summon the courage to escape, like John Post, face a wall of cult members who block their exit. The 12 Tribes' really awful history of young member harm allegations is one of their darkest secrets. While the cult publicly condemns intercourse-related harm, its internal handling of such cases tends to be shrouded in secrecy and denial. Allegations are often swept under the rug, with the accused being forgiven. Young members who report harm face disbelief, blame, and punishment, perpetuating a culture of silence and terror. The group supports itself through the operation of several businesses, most of which revolve around agriculture, as well as those cafes and restaurants I mentioned earlier. And how do they do that? using unpaid and less than legal age labor. Thousands of Tokyo commuters stepped out into a spring morning in March of 1995. Well, a doomsday cult known as Aum Shinrikyo embarked on a diabolical journey. Now, if you were just a commuter, it was like an ordinary day. But this cult had laid the groundwork for horror. 5 bags filled with a liquid nerve agent were strategically placed on the city's busy underground systems, and as the packages leaked, stinging fumes really harmed innocent passengers. Within moments, the nerve agent, which sarin gas, kind of took its toll. 13 died, over 5,800 people suffered, some folks were left blind and paralyzed. It was the worst domestic harm attack on Japanese soil. Now, this cult's name, Aum Shinrikyo, meaning Supreme Truth, emerged in the 1980s as a spiritual fusion of Hindu, Buddhist, and apocalyptic Christian beliefs. Their leader, Shoko Asahara, proclaimed himself the Christ. Asahara was sentenced to death in 2004 for the attacks, and his final appeal failed in 2011. And in June of 2012, his execution was postponed due to further arrests of members. He was ultimately executed in 2018. The Matamoros cult, led by Adolfo de Jesus Costanzo in Mexico, was a twisted version of the Palo Mayombe tradition. His cult members nicknamed him the Godfather, or El Padrino, and he led this cult with Sarah Aldrete, who was called the Godmother, or La Madrina. Costanzo's mother had groomed him for darkness. She had invoked the supernatural, she sacrificed animals, you name it. Now Costanzo, he manipulated local kingpins, promising them immunity from law enforcement through his dark rituals. He lured unsuspecting victims to perform really awful human sacrifices at his ranch. Eventually victims were exhumed and they found some really bad stuff. Costanzo and his high priestess eluded capture though. Authorities resorted to burning the cult's shack, metaphorically smoking Costanzo out of hiding, and a violent standoff resulted in his death and the arrest of several cult members. Number 5, Scientology. I figured it was the easiest to kick off today, with the most obvious cult, and personally for me, the scariest. Scientology is a set of beliefs and practices invented by the American author L. Ron Hubbard, who developed a series of ideas that he called Dianetics, which he represented as a form of therapy. Okay, yeah, that's great therapy. An organization that he established in 1950 to promote it went bankrupt, and he lost the rights to his book in 1952. He then recharacterized his ideas as a religion for tax purposes and renamed them Scientology. By 1954, he had regained the rights to Dianetics and founded the Church of Scientology, which remains the largest organization promoting Scientology today. There are practitioners independent of the church in what is called the Free Zone, and estimates put the number of Scientologists at just under 40,000 people worldwide. So, not a lot of people at all, just a small town. Scientology beliefs include reincarnation and that traumatic events cause problematic engrams in the mind. They claim that an activity called auditing can remove the bad engrams. A fee is charged though for each session of auditing. Once an auditor deems an individual free of engrams, typically after several years, they are given the status of clear. After being deemed clear, adherents can take part in further activities called operating thetan levels, which require further payments. The operating thetan texts are kept secret for most followers and are revealed only after adherents have typically given hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Scientology organization. If you don't have ridiculous amounts of money to burn, don't worry, they're freely available online on sites such as WikiLeaks. And if you don't want to waste your time, these texts say past lives took place in extraterrestrial cultures. Look, I don't agree with Scientology, but I do agree with aliens visiting Earth. But these involve an alien called Xenu, described as a planetary ruler that existed 70 million years ago who brought billions of aliens to Earth and killed them with thermonuclear weapons. Yeah, I totally believe that. Despite being kept secret from most followers, this forms the essential mythological framework of Scientology's crazy logic? From soon after their formation, these groups have generated considerable opposition and controversy, in several instances because of their illegal activities. In 1967, Hubbard established a new elite group, the Sea Organization, or Sea Org, the membership of which was drawn from the most committed members of the church. By 1981, the 21-year-old David Miscavige, who had been one of his closest aides in the Sea Org, rose to prominence. Hubbard died at his ranch in Creston, California on January 24th of 1986, and Miscavige succeeded Hubbard as the head of the church, a position he holds till this day. If you really want a mystery to solve, try and find David's wife. In 2013, actress Leah Remini, a former Scientologist and vocal critic of the organization, filed a missing persons report with the Los Angeles Police Department concerned about her disappearance. The LAPD allegedly contacted Shelley and closed the case within hours. Despite assurances from Church of Scientology spokespeople that Shelley Miscavige is alive and well, many continue to express skepticism. In 2022, after hearing about an investigation into now retired LAPD LAPD Captain Corey Palka about alerting others of confidential police investigations, Remini revealed photographs of Palka accepting a $20,000 check from Scientology for LAPD charities in one of a Scientology information kiosk located in the LAPD Hollywood division. While speaking with Palka in his office, Remini noticed a letter of thanks to him from Scientology with an invitation to lunch at their celebrity center. So, bribery. As of 2023, Shelly Miscavige's whereabouts remain unknown, and who knows if we'll ever know. In the 1970s, Hubbard's followers engaged in a program of criminal infiltration of the US government, resulting in several executives of the organization being convicted and imprisoned for multiple offenses by a US federal court. Now, Hubbard himself was convicted in absentia of fraud by a French court in 1978 and sentenced to 4 years in prison. And in 1992, a court here in Canada convicted the Scientology organization in Toronto of spying on law enforcement and government agencies and criminal breach of trust, later upheld by the Ontario Court of Appeal. The Church of Scientology was convicted of fraud by a French court in 2009, a judgment upheld by the Supreme Court of Cassation in 2013. The Church of Scientology has been described by government inquiries, international parliamentary bodies, scholars, law lords, and numerous superior court judgments as both a dangerous cult and a manipulative profit-making business. I could talk about them for hours and just how awful they are, so let me know in the comments if that's, something y'all would be interested in. Number 4, Family International. Initially called Teens for Christ, Children of God, or COG, it was founded in 1968 by rogue preacher David Berg in Huntington Beach, California. Attracting young runaways and hippies, David preached a kind of worship that combined the ways of Jesus Christ with the free love movement of the 1960s. Group living, zealous converting, and isolated communes were all pillars of this church. Members, who amounted to around 15,000 people across the world at its peak, didn't go to work or go to school. And they also didn't believe in the nuclear family, so younglings were grouped together and lived separately from their parents. In the late 1970s, COG became notorious for the sexual practices that one of the founder's own daughters later described as religious sexual coercion. David coined the term flirty fishing, which was a sexual practice in which women would allegedly have sex with men to bring them into the cult. And if that wasn't scummy enough, he also promoted and encouraged the sexualization of younglings within the COG community. As David manipulated the COG family with his sadistic practices, members started leaving the community, including the families of actors Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan, who both grew up in the communes. Former COG members began coming forward in the early 1990s, describing an environment that permitted and encouraged the physical and sexual taking advantage of younglings. Ricky Dupuis appeared on a talk show in 1993 and revealed that he'd been ordered by the group to forcibly fornicate with someone barely in the double digits of age. Ricky later took his own life, sadly, like many other members of the group, including the founder's son, Ricky Rodriguez, who was sexually taken advantage of throughout his life by his father and the group. Although David died in 1994 while under FBI investigation, the cult continues to exist and now goes by the name Family International, although the group claims that the horrific practices are a thing of the past. Why do I not believe them? Number 3, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, known as FLDS for short. Time to focus on the fundamentalist sects that split off when the core religion opted to renounce the practice of polygamy. Technically speaking, polygamy is the practice or custom of having more than one wife or husband at the same time. And while I'm not judging multiple partners or open relationships when they're consensual or of age, there's a lot of ick to unpack here. It is estimated that 6,000 to 10,000 members reside within the congregate sister sites of Hilldale, Utah, Colorado City, Arizona, El Dorado, Texas, West Cliff, Colorado, Mancos, Colorado, Creston and Bountiful, British Columbia, and Pringle, South Dakota. Those who wish to continue the practice remained Mormon, but on their own terms. Polygamy remains, illegal, and in 1953, an entire FLDS community was arrested in Short Creek, Arizona, otherwise known as modern-day Colorado City, and most had their little ones taken from them for safety. A compound in Texas was raided in 2008 after Child Protective Services was made aware of allegations of poor living situations. Over 400 younglings were taken from the compound and placed in CPS custody. So I remember hearing about the raid while watching the Oprah Winfrey Show with my mom, of all things. If my brain serves me right, it was about 10 months after the raid when all of the younglings were returned to the Yearning for Zion Ranch, and it was such huge news that she was being granted access to this top secret compound. Leader of the FLDS, Warren Jeffs, remains in his position, despite being in prison for life after acts against minors. Number 2, Aum Shinrikyo. Founded by Shoko Asahara in 1984, Aum Shinrikyo is a Japanese new religious movement and doomsday cult who first made headlines in the late 80s amid accusations that Asahara was forcing members to donate money to the group and holding them against their will. Pardon me, I'll backtrack for a moment. Although Aum was, from the beginning considered controversial in Japan, it was not initially associated with serious crimes. Aum's public relations activities included publishing comics and animated cartoons that attempted to tie its religious ideas to popular anime and manga themes, including space missions, powerful weapons, world conspiracies, and the quest for ultimate truth. Like many cult leaders, Asahara believed in an imminent doomsday. This time it was caused by a world war started by the United States. And of course, according to him, only his followers would survive. In 1991, Aum began using wiretapping to get NTT uniforms and equipment and created a manual for wiretapping. In July of 1993, cult members sprayed large amounts of liquid containing Bacillus anthracis spores from a cooling tower on the roof of Aum Shinrikyo's Tokyo headquarters. However, their plan to cause an anthrax epidemic failed. The attack resulted in a large number of complaints about bad odors, but no infections. Thank goodness. But by the end of 1993, the cult started secretly manufacturing the nerve agent sarin and later VX. Aum tested its sarin on sheep at Banjawarn Station, a remote pastoral property in Western Australia, killing 29 sheep. So both sarin and VX were then used in several assassinations and attempts between 1994 to 95. In 1995, the group executed a sarin gas attack in the Tokyo subway, which caused the deaths of 12 people and injured 50 more. The group says that those who carried out attacks did so secretly, without being known to other executives and ordinary believers. After that attack, Japanese authorities learned that the group had also been responsible for the death of lawyer Tsutsumi Sakamoto, who was working on a class action lawsuit against Aum Shinrikyo at the time of his death. Almost forgot, the group also killed his wife and descendant. Yes, independent people. On July 6 of 2018, after exhausting all appeals, Asahara and 6 followers on death row were executed as punishment for the 1995 attacks and other crimes. So I'm glad that unlike, some of the other folks I've discussed today, some justice was actually served in this situation. 6 additional followers were executed on the 26th of the same month, and at 12:10 a.m. on New Year's Day of 2019, at least 9 people were injured when a car was deliberately driven into crowds celebrating the New Year on Takashita Street in Tokyo. Local police reported the arrest of Kazuhiro Kusakabe, the suspected driver, who allegedly admitted to intentionally ramming his vehicle into crowds to protest his opposition to the death penalty, specifically in retaliation for the execution of the before-mentioned Aum cult members. Number 1. Good News International Church. The Good News International Ministries, GNIM for short, or Good News International Church, was founded by Paul Mackenzie and his first wife in 2003. So this group attracted international attention in April of this year when it was revealed that Mackenzie had allegedly instructed members to starve themselves to meet Jesus before the end of the world, which has resulted in the deaths of over 400 people. And when you consider more than 600 people have been reported missing, it's just a yikes situation. About 65 rescued followers were charged with attempted self-ending of life after they refused to eat during their stay at a rescue center. The Doomsday Cult is adamantly anti-Western, and with amenities such as healthcare, education, and sports being dismissed as evils of Western life, and with Mackenzie condemning the United States, the United Nations, and the Catholic Church as tools of Satan. Look, I'm all for condemning the Catholic Church, but calling it a tool of Satan feels like an oxymoron. The group devotes much of its teachings to the end times, ergo they've been dubbed a doomsday cult, the definition of which is a cult that believes in apocalypticism and millenniarism, including both these, that predict disasters and those that attempt to destroy the entire universe. Mackenzie founded the GNIM in 2003 and accumulated a sizable following, largely due to convincing his followers that he could speak directly with God. Beginning in the late 2010s, Mackenzie's church began to receive a renewed wave of scrutiny regarding the internal practices of the organization, particularly in 2017 when Mackenzie and his wife faced several charges relating to the church. He was chastised for inciting students to abandon their education after denouncing it as ungodly, as well as radicalizing and denying medical care to them afterwards. Several students died as a result, and in 2017, 93 students were rescued by government authorities from the group. After another arrest in 2019, he departed Malindi and headed to the Shakahola forest, where the mass starvation occurred earlier this year. Now, Mackenzie did not join his followers in the mass starvation. In fact, a dietary menu was found on the wall in one of the special houses in the forest, believed to be his resting room. He's currently under police custody as the process of exhuming the bodies continues. Police authorities claim that some bodies were missing organs and believed they were being harvested and sold.